The quickly evolving health story set markets into absolute turmoil again today and saw governments rolling out economic mitigation plans and even the promise of legislation to protect workers. With us for their reaction to it all, we welcome via Skype from Burlington, Ontario, Craig Alexander, partner and chief economist at Deloitte Canada, and via Skype from the nation's capital, Armine Yalnizyan, the Atkinson Foundation's fellow on the future of workers. And thank you to both of you for joining us in this somewhat offbeat manner. Usually we have you two in studio, but the times being what they are, we're doing it all via Skype now. Craig, start us off, if you would, please. In your experience, today's tumble on the markets, where does it compare to the all-time worst losses in history?
Well, the market reaction is even faster than the reaction that we had in 2008, 2009, because the market's basically responding enormously quickly to the likelihood of a global recession. What's actually really remarkable to me is how interest rates and bond yields have fallen to a point where now they are well below what we actually had during the global financial crisis of 0809. So, we've seen a lot of financial market distress, and a lot of it is trying to predict, what is in store. And basically, the financial markets have quickly priced in a global recession.
Priced in a global recession. Okay. Armine, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think this is the first recession in my lifetime where you're seeing how the impact on services and the rollback of demand for services is going to have an enormous trickle out effect, because about 75% of the economy is in services, and we haven't seen that before. Most recessions are goods-based. This one is going to have a huge service-driven demand and supply cutback.
Craig, we already have seen both the Federal Reserve in the United States and the Bank of Canada here cut interest rates about as low as they can be cut, presumably with the idea to getting people investing again, getting people hiring people again. Can you imagine that that's actually going to work?
Well, I think actually what central banks are doing is they've cut interest rates, and then they've announced financial measures to help and ensure that credit continues to flow. The lower interest rates are stimulative to the economy, but they're not going to be stimulative like they were in the past, because at the end of the day, even with interest rates at remarkably low levels, people are not going to go out and buy houses because they're not going to go to open houses. Because of the nature of this shock, monetary policy is not going to be as effective in stimulating growth as it otherwise would. And I think in this environment, fiscal policy is going to be far more impactful. What we need to be mindful of is going to be the disruption to the economy in terms of the impact on income for workers that can't go to work, the impact on workers that have their incomes disrupted. It'll also have impact on businesses in terms of their cash flows. And so really we're dealing with a different environment. So lower rates is helpful and positive. I think it's more important for the financial system than it is in terms of stimulating growth. I think the onus is going to be more on governments to provide the fiscal boost to try and combat the economic losses.
Well, Armine, since you are the Atkinson Fellow responsible for looking into the future of workers, this is a good time, I suspect, to ask you about the announcement that the Ontario government made today, including a very impassioned plea by the Labour Minister, Monty McNaughton, saying that nobody's going to lose their job as a result of, if you're an employee who's been quarantined because of COVID-19, if you're a parent who has to stay home because of school closures, if you're an employee told not to come to work by your employer, nobody is going to lose their job as a result of that. He said, starting on the 25th of January, retroactive to then, when the first cases were first came to fore, right until the end of this crisis is over. That's what he said. I'd like your reaction to that announcement today.
I think this was something that had to happen, that you couldn't have somebody be fired because they're sick. And another measure they brought into place is that you don't have to go to the doctor to get a sick note, which would have been a crazy thing to ask for sick workers to do. But surprisingly, the Ontario government is even more They could have done more, let's put it this way. On March the 14th, Trump's government put into place the emergency paid sick leave, which passed in the House and makes sure that employers with fewer than 500 employees, including nonprofits, have to provide employees with 2 weeks of paid sick leave, paid at the employee's regular rate. And that leave also includes additional coverage for employees who take time off to care for their family members or their kids because of school and childcare closures. And that payment would be at 2/3 of the regular rate. So there was a lot more that this government could have done to make sure that a sickness calamity doesn't turn into a financial calamity, because without paid sick leave, a lot of people will show up to work even when they're sick because they can't afford to make it to the end of the month without some kind of income.
Craig, what's your view on the government's decision so far, at any rate, not to include paid sick days as part of this worker compensation idea?
Well, I think that we've already had announcements from the federal government. We've had announcements from the provincial government, but to be honest, I think it's only the start. I think we've only seen the initial responses in terms of what governments are going to do. When the federal government announced the expansion of changes to the EI system to allow it easier to get access to employment insurance, they said that they would implement measures to help workers that won't qualify for EI. But quite frankly, we actually don't know what it looks like yet. And so ultimately, there is a lot of workers who are going to end up in a situation where their employment situation is disrupted by this. It could be they're still employed, but the number of hours they're working goes down in terms of hourly work. It could be remote work that they cut back on hours. There's going to be income effects here, and then there's going to be people that the current income support framework isn't going to catch, because, and increasingly we do have more jobs that are self-employed, temporary, contract, gig workers that aren't going to qualify for the typical supports. So I do think governments are going to have to do more. I think that the way I would interpret it is, we've only had the number of cases in Canada is limited. The government can still act if in order to address the concerns that could happen in the labor market. And things like when the Prime Minister says today, people should stay home from work. Okay, now you need a framework in place to actually support those workers so that they can actually afford to be away from the workplace. Yeah. I do think we should stress, though, that this will pass, right? I mean, we need very strong measures by government. I think we need very large fiscal stimulus by the federal government, and for provinces, particularly those that can afford it. I think probably more of the weight has to fall on the federal shoulders. But those measures are basically to help the economy through a period of time. Eventually, the flu will burn itself out, and we will have a rebound in activity. The key is helping workers and businesses get through the period where you're having the economic disruption and the containment.
Well, to that end, let me ask Armine about this. Do we infer from the absence of the policy that you wanted to see unveiled today by the Ontario government, do we infer that they simply don't believe that businesses in this province, particularly small ones, are able to withstand, as many as, who knows, 75, 85, 90% of their employees booking off sick and getting paid for it?
I don't know what the thinking is at the Ontario level. I found the tone of their press conference today very reassuring. It was like the grown-ups had returned. But I agree with Craig that the paid leave policies, particularly for people who are not EI eligible, are going to have to come from the federal level. And it would have been nice to hear the Ontario government saying that they were working with their federal partners and other colleagues to come up with a pan-Canadian solution to the need for paid sick leave so that everybody that is sick stays at home. The stay home message could not be more important, but it's meaningless if people can't afford to stay home. Mm-hmm. So acknowledging that this is going to be a financial stress, particularly for people that are bus drivers, Uber. I mean, you're telling people to stay home. You're going to get more Deliveroo workers, Uber drivers, people that are bringing you stuff to your door. They can't afford to stay home if they get sick, and we don't want them to stay, like we don't want too many sick people coming from door to door. So we really
Indeed.
do need a strategy.
Let me do a follow-up with you on this. I wonder whether you were expecting something today from Queen's Park on the issue of, how much landlords ought to be forgiving of tenants right now if they're 1 week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks behind in the rent, given that, people's salaries are going to be interrupted by what's going on right now.
Well, we did write with Jennifer Robson, and I wrote a piece that was published in the Star today in print and appeared online on Friday about rent banks. So we know that CMHC can work with mortgage holders, and we know that we can provide rent banks to delimit the loss of housing, because the last thing in the world you want is that when people get sick, they also lose their housing or end up being in some kind of default. So both for mortgage holders and for renters, there are techniques that we could be bringing into place to ensure that people do not lose their home when they're sick. And it's really a moment for all of our governments to step up.
Craig, rent banks, is that something you could sign on to?
I think that when it comes to, people, how much money, the point is, if your income is suddenly disrupted and all your payments stay the same, the math isn't going to add up. And what's one of the biggest costs that households have? It's rent or mortgage payments. I mean, I think that we're going to be in an environment where landlords or financial institutions are going to have to be flexible and provide additional support to individuals. Like I said, it's a temporary environment so that we can contain the spread of the virus. It'll burn itself out. We're talking a matter of sort of months to a couple of quarters. It's something that we need to work our way through. And we need to ensure that people can actually manage their expenses through this period. Like, one of the things I'm worried about is you have an income disruption to households and you have highly indebted Canadian households. This is a bad combination. There's going to be a lot of indebted Canadians that are going to need some help and some forgiveness and flexibility so they can meet their financial obligations down the road when this is passed. But you made a really good point. On the business side, just saying, okay, well, everybody should have paid sick leave. For many small, medium-sized businesses, they might not be able to afford that, right? So particularly if it's like the entire workforce being away or a large segment of the workforce being away. So there's an enormous cash flow problem for businesses. They have so much cash on hand. Now the revenues have been disrupted. In some cases, the businesses are having supply chain problems. They can't get inventories of goods in for them to sell. We're in an environment where people are being encouraged not to go out to the stores. So you're going to see a big drop in retail spending. And the question is, do those companies, those small and medium-sized businesses, do they have the cash flow that will float them through to the other side of the valley? And the answer is they're probably going to need more support. And some of the support could come from financial institutions in terms of banks basically, telling firms that, they don't have to make the monthly payments that are due. There'll be some sort of adjustment in the pay schedule till the other side of this challenge. It also could be the case that we're going to need governments both at the federal, provincial level, to provide support. Anything that helps businesses with their cash flow, particularly small businesses with their cash flow in this environment, would be advantageous. So, for example, if you had municipalities basically give a break on the municipal taxes to businesses, that could help them manage their cash flow to the other side. How could municipalities afford that? They probably can't. So where does the money come from? Well, it probably has to come from the provincial government.
Indeed, or federal.
So this is the way we need to think about it.
Right. All right. I want to switch now, if I can, to the border. Some significant announcements coming out of Ottawa today, and I guess to a lesser extent out of Queen's Park, because Premier Ford did say he wanted the border open to trade but closed to visitors. And that is, in effect, what the federal government announced today. No more international travelers, except for Americans, coming into Canada. And the border stays open to the goods and services that trade over that border, which we all know is to the tune of billions of dollars a day. Armine, in your view, was that the right announcement today?
It's hard to tell. what everybody has said is this is the guidance from the public health officials at both the federal and the provincial level. And a lot of people have been talking about why would you restrict travel from everybody, from every country except from the United States, where their reaction to the contagion has been so slow, and we know that the cases are going to accelerate. On the other hand, most of the people that are coming across the border from the United States are Canadians that are returning home. Very few very few Americans visit Canada when there's still snow on the ground, and when they know that they can only come in and self-quarantine for 14 days or self-isolate for 14 days, that's going to reduce their desire to come anyway. So I think it's a bit of a tempest in a teapot to say, oh my gosh, why aren't we restricting these people? On the one hand. On the other hand, the contagion has not reached the proportions it is likely to reach in the United States. So even when they say, well, you know, essential workers are truck drivers bringing over supplies across the border, how are we going to make sure those truck drivers aren't contaminated? I think there's another shoe to drop on this one.
Well, that's the thing. Craig, can you just give us a brief comment on this? Would it actually, given how interconnected our economies are, would it be next to impossible to prohibit Americans from coming over the border to here for business purposes, et cetera?
Well, the economic cost to Canada would increase dramatically. I mean, if you look at each province in Canada, each province does more north-south trade than it does east-west. Our economy is oriented along north-south lines. You know, if you think about Canada, we're, you know, from an economy point of view, we're a little smaller than California, and from a population perspective, we're a little smaller than California, but we're spread across the northern border. So if you shut the Canada-U.S. border, ultimately the economic cost to Canada would be far greater. So I think that we can see that the cases in Europe are expanding, and they've expanded rapidly. Many of the governments there are taking very strong efforts to do containment. We're now restricting travel from Europe, you know, from international, except for the United States. The reason why the U.S. border is being kept open is for economic reasons. I think if the health risks increase enough, then we'll shut the Canada-U.S. border as well. But I think it's, in a sense, it's the last resort.
Okay, let's do it. We got a couple of minutes left here, and let me get each of you to weigh in on this. And I don't want to get too far out over my skis, as the expression goes, in setting up this question. But it seems 3 months later in China, as if they have got a bit of a control on this thing right now, and that supply lines are up and rolling again, and that the economy is starting to get back to whatever sense of normalcy there was. 3 months. Craig, do you think that's a reasonable timeline for this continent as well?
It's possible. The one observation is that the Chinese system, political system, is such that it was much easier to do very, very rigid and sort of totalitarian containment. I think it would be much harder to do that in Canada and in the United States. So, you know, going back to the point I made earlier, though, you know, the health officials all tell us the same thing, which is we need to take really strong actions now to bend the curve and reduce the number of cases. But if you are successful at that and you eat the economic cost, then that's how you set the stage for this virus to burn itself out. So, you know, containment is absolutely critical, and the stronger the containment, the faster we're going to get through this.
Armine, last word to you.
I couldn't agree more with what Craig just said. Everybody's saying that if we contain properly, we're looking at a 4-month horizon. But the question is, will we be able to contain properly? Will we be able to prevent potentially not enough health care for enough cases spilling over into the community, as usually women doing unpaid work do the heavy lifting and contagion continues to spread? And will we prevent the contagion spreading from a health crisis to a household finance crisis if we don't get enough paid sick leave into households, enough cash to deal with the upfront costs of self-containment, and enough cash flow to make sure people don't lose their housing when they're sick? All of those are question marks. We don't know how whether 4 months is an appropriate time frame or it's on the short side. So we're just at the beginning of a very interesting journey where we're being asked to think differently than we have in the last 40 years. We're being asked to think, instead of our self-interest, how our personal behavior can help ourselves, but help everybody around us. So that's a bit of a culture shift.
The beginning of that journey, but sadly the end of our conversation tonight. That's our time. Craig Alexander in Burlington and Armine Yalnizyan in the nation's capital. Really good of both of you to join us on TVO tonight. Thanks so much.
Thank you for inviting us.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.